Hello, hello. Welcome to another evening of streaming. If you happen to be in a place where it's evening right now, if not, then welcome whatever time of day it is. Hey, Sherry. No problem. Thanks for stopping by, and thanks for everything else too. so, um, Again, I brought my friend with me today in case anybody has forgotten what time of year it's supposed to be. Just brought a friendly reminder. Also a reminder that my name is Scott Claus. That's S Claus to those who know. So that must mean I have ties to this guy. And so I thought I should invite him to sit in with us again this week. We'll probably have him sitting in with us again for a while and helping us ring in a happy holiday season. Anyway, so today is another day of streaming. If you've not done this before, I'm going to be talking a little bit about animation stuff. I'm going to be working on a short. I'm actually not going to be working on it too much. I'm going to actually be showing you how I made the thing. I wanted to talk today a little bit about animation shorts and the whole perspective of them. So why would you make them? What is the deal with them? How do you make them? And how could you make your own animation short? I've made quite a few of them. I'm not sure that any of them are award-winning masterworks, but I have made several short films, and a few of them were short animated films, and so I thought that makes me qualified to talk about it a little bit. So I'm going to be talking about a project that I've just finished. I haven't actually officially rolled it out anywhere yet. Just sort of gently put it out there. It's a very Christmassy, someone might say over-the-top Christmassy, schmaltzy little musical thing with some dogs in it. So I'm going to be going through that tonight and talking about the experience of making it with the bent of how could you make your own animation shorts if that's something you're interested in, or maybe if you're curious, if you I'm wondering if you want to make an animation short, or maybe you are interested in making animation shorts and by the time I'm done talking tonight you'll have decided you don't want to do that after all. So it's all good. I'm also here to talk about anything animated. So the bent for tonight is actually, the emphasis is on 2D animation, but I've also done CG animation, and I've spent a lot of years in the animation business working at big studios like Disney and DreamWorks and Rhythm and Hues on big movies like Pocahontas and Road to El Dorado, and then Life of Pi was probably my last big huge credit. And then now I am teaching. I teach full time, and I teach for CG Spectrum. And so if you are interested in anything that we're talking about tonight that I am discussing, please feel free to hop on over to cgspectrum.com. You can find that address if you just type in cgspectrum.com. I think I have a logo here somewhere. That one's not it. Somewhere in here I've got overlay. There you go. So that's got cgspectrum.com on it, among other things. And so go ahead and hop by there if you're interested at all in what's going on with computer-aided graphics and art. There are a lot of really cool classes, a lot of really cool departments, some of which are illustration-based, some of which are moving images-based, and then effects and everything various and sundry. And my current position is I'm in the 2D department working on hand-drawn stuff. And it's a really exciting time for hand-drawn animation where we're seeing a lot more shows that are being constructed using 2D animation. There was a bit of a lull there for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so. And now things are starting to pick up again with Netflix and other studios coming on board with 2D animation in a way that's a little bit more aided by CG graphics. So CG Spectrum, computer graphics spectrum, the whole gamut, the whole thing. So anyway, I'm going to get started here and start talking about this project that I'm working on currently. If you notice anything funny going on, if there's any technical glitches or anything odd, I always love it when people chime in and let me know right away. So in case you can't hear me, can't see, please feel free to give me a holler and say, nope, stupid, it's not working. On the other end, if you are here and hanging out and would like to chat, please feel free to chat on whichever service you're currently watching this on, if you are, and feel free to chime in with any comments, questions, suggestions, or anything you'd like to discuss with anybody else who happens to show up today. I'll leave that up to you. As long as you keep it clean, keep it friendly, everything will be cool. But I'm just going to jump in and start discussing my short project now. And I will just wait and see if anybody wants to talk about anything else. All right, so put Santa away, and now start talking about the world of Toon Boom. So first things first, I'm going to put the link for the complete, because the thing is actually basically done. I'm going to put the link for it in the chat window on my end. So if you want to just see what I'm working on, it's already done. So you can just check it out here. I will upload that again later if anybody comes in late. But it's just a link to YouTube, and feel free to go and check out the video that I've uploaded if you want to see what the final result was. But what you see on my screen at the moment is one frame, one single moment from the project. I started out with the idea that I wanted to have dogs singing, and singing about Christmas and singing about how much they love Christmas. And then I did kind of expanded the idea into the idea of lonely dogs. Actually, that came really late. That was the last thing that happened. But just the idea of these dogs, and they're out in the middle of the snow, and they're singing about how if they were adopted, then they would actually, and if they could sing, because dogs can't sing, then they would actually sing how much they love you. So isn't that a sweet Christmas gesture for sad little dogs? And like all animation shorts, the first thing that I did was I had the idea, right? So the first thing that I did was I thought, well, I have this idea. I personally believe that art and creativity is all about, you've got a problem and you need to solve it. And in this case, the problem was, I just have this idea. How do I get it out there? And if I feel really strongly about it, if I feel like I want to get it out there for some reason. And so I decided, well, I think this would make a nice little animated short piece. And I think that I could do it quickly and efficiently and just knock something out just to say I did it. As much as anything, just to show my students, it's not that tough to do an animation short. If you've watched it, if you click on the link to watch it, you will find that it is not a work of beauty. I didn't focus on the animation itself. I did not intend to do something that's a beautiful illustration of animation. I wanted to show that you can actually do a short pretty quickly and efficiently using all sorts of different time-saving measures that can make it so it's still an animated short, but it's not necessarily the most fleshed out, beautiful thing. If that's what you want to do, if you want to do something that's a beautiful piece of animation that you can use to try and get a job and want to add to your reel, or in some way or shape or form promote yourself as an animator, that's probably not what I'm going to be talking about so much today. What I'm talking about is I've got this idea and I want to get it out there, and I want to make an animated short, and I'm not concerned that I don't have money, don't have time, don't even have necessarily the skills. I was making animated films long before I had the skills to make them. And partially what I'm talking about today is how you can climb on my shoulders and learn what I learned, so you don't have to go through all that. But so the first thing I did was I had an idea, and that's where all things should come from. It's just you have an idea, and people often say to me, they go, well, I want to make an animation short, or I want to make a short film in general, which is, I've also made a lot of those, just live action short films. My first question to them is always, why? So why do you want to make an animation short? It takes a long time to make movies. Even today, it's difficult to get a movie made and to do it right, do it in a nice way. What you'll find is that it's a collaborative process. You must use the help of other people if you really want to do something nice. In my case, I'm using the help of other people, whether they know it or not. I'm using Shutterstock backgrounds because I can't do backgrounds, or I don't feel comfortable doing it. And so you will find that making short films goes a lot easier if you're collaborative, if you like working with people. And it's not that I don't like working with people, but I'm kind of a control freak. I like to do everything myself. So so that's one of the things you have to think about right from the start is why do you want to make a short film? Is it because you want to get a gazillion hits on YouTube or something? I know people who've gotten videos that have had a gazillion hits. I myself have had a couple things go, I like to say semi-viral. I don't know if it's almost 400,000 hits. One thing I did, just a remix of a song, nothing exciting, that somebody liked it. And I don't think it's as hard as it seems to have a lot of hits or likes on something. But is that why you really want to make an animation short or a project of any kind, to get likes, to get hits, to get popularity? Or do you just want to do it because it's really cool? Oh, and Peter's Animation, hello right back. We're just talking about animated shorts today and the creation of them and such. So I always caution people when they say they want to make a short, it's like, ask yourself why you want to do it. What the correct answer should be is I want to do this because it's something that I just can't imagine not doing. It's something that I want to say, that I have to say, and in this case, animation is the only way to say it. So I had this idea of the dogs in the snow. Again, you can look on the link and see what it turned out like. Again, it's just a lo-fi animation thing. It's not a glorious animation piece by any stretch. Had this idea and I thought, well, how quickly could I turn it around? And wouldn't it be funny to, just make it really sad and cute and see if anybody picked up on it. And so, so the idea came first. So that's the first thing, well, two things. So one is when you have an idea, and then two, your motivation. What is it that's going to get you to finish I have the worst handwriting in the world, by the way. What is it that's going to get you through the tough parts of your project? Because it takes a long time to do animation in particular. It takes a long time to do movies, period. But animation in particular, most of my students who are 2D students, even the CG students, they understand that it takes a long time to create a movie frame by frame. And one of the reasons I did very limited animation for this piece was because if I had done it the way I originally dreamed of doing it, as a beautiful piece of animation that is really lush and complex, I'd be working on it for the next 5 years, and it probably still wouldn't be done, nor would it be done to my satisfaction. So I decided to think in terms of thrift. And so my motivation for doing it was because I wanted to do it. And I think that really is the only thing that will get you through the long, dark hours of creating a project by yourself, is that you just want to do it. You have something to say and you have to get it off your chest. And then after that, I think it's about time to start thinking of the technique. And what that really is, technique with a G, oh boy. My mom would be so unimpressed by my writing. Technique. So at some point you have to make this decision. Well, what medium do I want to communicate my idea? I always wanted to make movies. That was my first and most important love. And I made a lot of short films. They actually, I think, got worse the more I made them. I was clearly not meant to be a film director, but I don't think that took away from my desire to tell stories. And it doesn't mean that I didn't tell stories well. I just didn't have the eye for cinema that I probably needed, nor did I have the drive after making some, after some exploration. I decided that I just don't have the eye to be a cinematic director. And then I actually ended up taking some of my movie ideas and turning them into live shows, and that probably suited me a little bit better. And then again, I've made some animated pieces, and those actual short films, not like this thing tonight, where I tried to tell a story with animation. And in each case, it was like the one thing that I was really interested in doing was telling a story. And whether I was telling it with comic book art or films or my writing, that I do a lot of writing, it was always, there comes a point where I have to go, well, how am I going to tell this? Am I going to tell it in cinematic form, or is it a live piece, or is it a musical, just music? Is it a song I want to create? Because I create music too. or what is the medium, the technique. So in this case, I thought, well, the technique, it started out, I wanted to do something lush and do something fully animated, like you'd see in a feature film. And then the reality of it is that I just knew it would never happen if I didn't. I just don't have the hours for that anymore at this point in my life. And so again, I would have to spend years probably putting this together. And then for what? It wasn't a night that I felt that strongly about. So I thought, well, I'd just like to have something in time for maybe Christmas. And I've made other Christmas videos in the past where just something that I kind of slap together and then show it to people, and then the holiday's over, and then you move on. And it's not something that I've spent hours and hours and hours. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do a lush 2D animation. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll do it in CG because I'm comfortable with that. But then I thought, but I'd have to use somebody else's rigs or make my own, which isn't going to happen. And then I settled on doing it in 2D again, but maybe doing it in a limited style. And that's what I'm going to probably talk most about today, is how by choosing a limited animation style, I've freed myself up to be able to just get it out there. No, it's not going to be a thing of beauty and a joy forever to everybody, but certainly my animation peers in the business would probably look at it and laugh. I'm not even sure I'm going to, and I'm not laugh in a good way, but I'm not even sure I'm going to share it, how widely I'm going to share it. But I'm not ashamed of it. It's not something I'd put on my reel or anything to show what I can do. Anyway, but so I decided on a technique that would make it possible for me to finish, which would be a limited animation technique where I cut a lot of corners, and the fun of it actually comes from how limited it is. Sort of like, Charlie Brown cartoons, or the old days, or limited animation on TV shows like The Simpsons. So anyway, number 3 is a technique. Peter's animation says, very short animation. Right? First scene will always look good, but for the next shot, it doesn't look like that good. Well, for Peter's animation, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today, if you're interested, is how you keep yourself motivated. I will say this. It seems we as human beings are not designed to finish things very well. We're actually better at starting things than we are at finishing things. And the way I figure it out is this way. If here is where you start, and here is where you finish, because you're all sweaty and tired, right? Then somewhere in here is the process. Well, somewhere about here is where most people are going to get really tired. And I'm sick of this. Just absolutely tired of it. So somewhere in there is where we're going to get sick of things. And so what I think is, the way I look at it is, you can change let's do it this way. You can change things up and make your life a lot easier if you think of it that way, and then go, well, if my project is this size, then look how little I have to do to finish it. If my project is this size, look how much I have to finish it. See how it changes depending on how the size is. By the time I get to a project like this size, there's not very much to do to finish it at all. And then, it varies from size to size. Anyway, so that's how I kind of look at it. And so this whole sort of you are here thing changes based on how epic your project is. So that's part of why I emphasize technique, is talk yourself and really work out the idea in your head and go, what do I know I'm capable of? What are the things I know I can do that I've done before and I've gotten satisfaction out of it or gotten kudos? I know I can do one scene that's going to be really cool, and then 2 scenes that aren't going to be that cool at all. And then together, the 3 of them might turn out to be something really nice. So knowing yourself and knowing what you're capable of will help you cross the finish line. And then just whatever your idea is, putting it within the realm of stuff you know you can do, you can finish it. So I knew, because I've done it before, that I could finish a short piece, and that if it was limited animation, if I cut a lot of corners, I would at least have something and be able to finish it. Here's something they don't tell you in art school or anywhere else, but it's this. It is important. There's a big star. It is important to finish what you start. You must finish things, because every time you finish something, you prove that you could do it. And it makes it easier to finish something next time. Looks like he's staring up at the star, doesn't it? Right. Once you finish things, you know that you can finish another thing and another thing. Up until I was working in the industry, I was one of these people who would start projects and either peter out by the time I got to the end of them, or simply not finish them because I got distracted or bored or was just exhausted or had a better idea. And it wasn't until I actually was working in the industry that I got to a place where I could work all day on a project, put it down, come back the next day and pick up on it and continue working from there. And you really do need to do that if you're going to do an extended project of any kind, is you need to be able to keep your enthusiasm up. And part of what I was saying before was just making sure the scope of your project isn't too big. And another thing is gauging your time. So in my case, I knew that it's like Christmas was right here and I was right here. I don't remember when I started this, wasn't too long ago, a few weeks, a couple weeks. And I said, well, I've got this many weeks until Christmas. And in order to have it done, it needs to be done before Christmas so people can look at it and go, oh yeah, Christmas dogs, right? So that meant I now had this, this, and this. So let's say 3 weeks. So I had to figure by this point, the animation and everything should be prepared. And then so that by this point, then I'm wrapping it up and finishing it up. And that meant I knew that I would have to sustain my energy that long. How would I do it? By spreading the work out so that I don't have to do everything all at once, so that I can do some fun stuff here, some lazy stuff here, and then save up my energy to grind away at the cleanup tasks, refining everything and making it, polishing it up, making it look as nice as I can for the last pass before it's done. So it's just a thing that you have to practice. Is you have to learn how to discipline yourself. So I've got 4 days, 8 hours each, and I'm going to split each of the days in half. I'm going to work up until this point, then I'm going to take a nice long break, and then I'm going to work this point, and then take another break after that. And then sometimes towards the end, maybe I'll go in and I'll continue to work a little bit longer and take another break. And by doing that, you can chip away at a project and get it finished much easier than if you just start and then grind away and hope that it's going to work out nicely. A lot of amateur artists will approach things with the perspective of, I just want to see what will happen. I want to just sit down and just see what happens. And that's fine if you're exploring, and I don't say you shouldn't do that. But if you want to create a project that's going to be very beginning, middle, and end, which is an animation short is, then you have to think in terms of, how do I get through the beginning, in the middle, and the end? And one of the most important things is what is my ending? And when I'm coming up with this, so it's another one of my checkpoints. It's like, okay, I've created the technique. I've decided I'm going to do my story in limited animation form. So the next thing is to kind of start mapping it out and start thinking in terms of, well, what do I need to make this thing happen? And one of those things is you're going to have characters. You're going to have objects, and call them assets in 3D animation. But what I like to start out with is the beginning, and then the middle, and the end. Let me just write this out in my doctor's hand. Mom always said, oh, you could be a doctor because you've got the worst handwriting in the world. And all doctors apparently have bad handwriting. Anyways, the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's really important that you think about stuff like this. If you're going to make an animated short in particular, then you're going to be spending a lot of time on something, and hopefully by the end of it, you're going to have something that's really interesting to look at. But what I learned really early on in life is if your story isn't gripping, if it isn't interesting, if it doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end, or a direction, or a point, then nobody's going to watch it. And if you just stop here at the beginning and you're just like, well, I just want atmosphere, I just want world building, I want cool stuff that looks cool, that will sustain you for a little while, but after a while people will drift away no matter how pretty it is. You can think of special effects movies, maybe in recent history, where all that the film had was a pretty look to it. And after a while, you just lose interest. You just stop thinking about how pretty it is, and you start getting kind of bored or irritated, or just you're looking for something to grip you. So at some point there has to be something that's sort of like a hook, and that becomes the middle. And then at another point there has to be a conclusion. I always think in terms of, I teach a story class, and in terms of story, the beginning is a question that is answered by the end. So in the beginning, you start out with a question of some sort, a what if scenario, and by the end of it, you answer that question. So what if? Well, then this happened. And then the middle is how you get there from the what if to the how this happened. And just about every project that ever existed that was worth its salt had that, even if it was really odd, even if it was a really surreal, artsy piece that looks abstract. And even David Lynch films, if anybody even knows David Lynch anymore, even his stuff has kind of a beginning, middle, and end. There's the part where it wasn't, there's the part where it was going, and then there's the part where it isn't going anymore. But we can do better than that with projects. So I always like to map that out and just say the beginning, middle, and end. This is a story. And so this particular story is pretty simple. The dogs. Once upon a time, there was a dog who was singing in the snow because it wanted to be loved or whatever. And then it was joined by other dogs, and then they all ended up singing together. The end. And that's it. That's the story of this little project. But it does have a story, and I did put a lot of thought into it. Where will it start? Well, it'll start with one dog sitting there, like gazing off into space on a snowy winter's night inside a little shelter. And then what happens? It's joined by other dogs who are singing with it. And then what's the end? All the dogs are singing. And then I added this idea that a little cat pops up because it's all dogs. So I thought, well, what if there was also just like a little cat, and the kitty cat just goes meow at the end. And so that was the beginning, a middle, and an end. There were dogs, the dogs all sang, and then the cat finished singing in the end. So story, not the most compelling story in the world. It's 1 minute long, I think. It's like 50 seconds. And that's all I wanted it to be. And so that's all I needed to do. But that was based on the idea, and then the technique is then I came up with the idea of a story and fleshed that out as much as I felt needed to be fleshed out. And then once I was happy with that, then I started preparing and call it planning. Wow, look at that. And PLANNING, that's a little better. So planning. So the next thing is you got to plan. And there are no animated films of any merit that were made without planning. All animated films at some point went through a rigorous amount of planning, specifically the feature stuff that I worked on, the big budget feature stuff, but even the small stuff I worked on a couple like commercials and smaller projects here and there. And they all had to be planned out. When I made my own short films, like officially, like on 35 and film, and you can find those on YouTube as well, I think, somewhere. I'm not going to link to them right now, but trust me, they're out there. Even those were planned out rigorously beforehand. After I determined that I could do it and wanted to do it, would do it, and came up with a story that I thought was good enough to invest a lot of time and energy into, then I had to plan out, well, how would I go about doing this? What are the things I'm going to need to be able to do this? And what are some of the complications that could arise? So beneath planning, I would add things like layout. So layout is, I mean, I'm combining things, but layout is like, you want to think of your idea. Think of the idea that you have and try to lay it out in a way that you get some idea of what it could look like. And so my original idea for this, if I remember right, was I was going to have a dog that was a little bit more animated, a little bit more character. And, I was really hoping that I could do something that was kind of more animation involved, because I feel like, well, since I teach animation, that every now and then I need to show people that I can actually do it. And so I thought, well, I could do something in my own style, or maybe I could do somebody else's style. But I just tossed out some sloppy ideas, and I started playing around with dogs. and thinking in terms of more and less feature animation type animals, and just started coming up with ideas and thinking, well, what kind of a dog would I do, and what kind of a film would it be? Oh, it looks like a fox. Anyway, just tossing ideas around and thinking, well, if I'm going to do dogs, what kind of a dog would I do? What would I draw? What do I want this to look like? Is it going to be real sloppy? Is it going to be really Disneyfied? Will it be, any specific style, anime, anything? And I kind of focused on this because this is more my style. It's kind of how I draw my own cartoons all the time. And then just started sketching out ideas really fast and trying to get as many of the ideas down on paper down digitally as I could. So I just created a bunch of panels and then just thought, well, let's see. I'd have a dog, I'd be staring up at the moon or something. And I was thinking like Ralph the dog from the Muppet Show. It's just sitting there staring, and it's kind of pondering, just thinking, howling at the moon or something. And then out of that grew different panels where I explored the idea of, well, what else could happen in this scene? What else would I need to be able to pull this off? So I didn't have to have other dogs. So then I thought, well, if one of the dogs looks like Ralph, then maybe the other one has got like a big fluffy face or something, and just a nose sticking out and one of those mustaches. And then maybe there's another one that's really small and has kind of a squeaky voice and big ears like a chihuahua or something. And then that's when I think I got the idea that maybe it's missing an eye, so it's looking kind of damaged. And then I also thought about cats, and there are all sorts of ways that you can draw cats. So I just was playing around with some of these ideas and thinking, well, what's feasible? What are the things I could do? And while I was doing that, then I was also creating panels saying, well, what's going to happen in this? So first there was one dog, and so there's just one dog here, and then there was a bunch of them. So there's a bunch of dogs. And then the last scene, they all converge as one. There's a whole group of them. You ever heard that? That's not helping anything. And then, like I said, I had the idea for this little punchline. So then I thought, well, is it going to be all one shot? And if it's all one shot, then do I have to have a camera that's zooming in and out? And I thought, well, maybe I could use 3D animation reference. And so I actually created some 3D animation reference using a character, I think it's called Balto, a dog. Really strong animation. I might even have that in here somewhere. Can show you what it was going to look like. I don't think I do. No, yeah, it's there. So you can see, here, just focusing on that one. You can see my idea was, my original intent was to do something that was a lot more animation intensive. If things had worked out, it would have been like, something that you'd see in a Disney cartoon. So I can just play this. I'm not going to play the sound, but you can see, that I actually did semi-animate this and do it in a real, over-the-top Disney-ish kind of way. And my idea was I would have taken this as a foundation and then gone ahead and used it as reference for 2D animation. So I would have, this is real blocked out. It's not fully fleshed out animation. It's just sort of blocked out. Actually, kind of reminds me of like a Disneyland animatronic figure or something. I think it stops right about here. This was just the first part of it, if I remember right. It only went to a certain point, but I'll let that play for a little bit if you're interested in seeing what it almost looked like. Yes, it goes to about here. So stop it at 3:13 and just let that play for a little bit. So you can see that it was, it was going to look a little bit more like fully fleshed out animation. So again, this isn't fully fleshed out animation. All I did was I just rotated the head a little bit here and there and used the jaw as a hinge, because that's all I needed. I just needed reference that I could use to determine the timing of this. Oh, forgot to mention the most important thing. I mean, it was based on a song. So I decided to put a song together, which took me about 5 minutes to just put this little sad little song together. It was kind of almost a satire of like New Age and I don't know, just that sort of heart in your sleeve sort of Disney-ish thing. So I put that together and then had that to sync to. So I went through and I took care of that, and that was when I was able to start animating it. So to take a step back, once I had my soundtrack, let's go up here. There we go. Now, once I had my soundtrack, let's start here, there. Then all I really had to do was separate things out and make them synced. And sync is pretty easily, it's pretty easy to accomplish once you know the secret. I'm always amazed that people don't know more about how to do soundtracks to things, because it's just not that hard. And what it requires is that you just have to be able to analyze your footage, your sound footage, and make your phonemes and make sure that you understand where everything is and on the soundtrack. And so set this one up. So for the soundtrack, it looks something like this, right? You've got all these sounds on the soundtrack, and you can see it on mine. If I zoom in a little tighter, maybe you can see it's that top row right here. It's got all these little divots in it. It looks something like this. And I'm not going to do it now because it's the most annoying sound in the world. But if you push the buttons in Toon Boom, I'll just do a little bit of it. Maybe you can hear that. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but if you can hear it, you can hear like little poppy sounds, and it's just helping you to figure out where consonants are. And so in the soundtrack that looks something like this, you can find out that frame, whatever, 132, for example, has a T sound for the word top or trip or Tom. So on frame 132, you just make a note of it somewhere and just say T at 132. And then you continue on, you scrub through using your cursor. And then you find the next one. In this case, maybe it's an off sound at 136 or something. And then you make a note of that. There's an A at 136. And you just keep going like that. For M's or O's or anything that travels for a really long time. Let's say there's an S here, and the S goes from here all the way to here, which is a P, spoon or something. So the S goes all that distance. Well, then you just do what I just did, make an arrow that says it's S all the way until it gets to the P, so you can hold an S shape. Oh, good, Peter's animation. Thanks. Glad you could hear it. That helps explain. And maybe you've heard that in other programs as well, where if you scrub on it, you can hear the soundtrack. And so anyway, you go through and you just analyze your footage, and you're looking for your sound effects. Sorry. You're looking for your sound pops. And so in this one, I eventually had, if I could sing the TH, this, that's another this, and then S all the way down, and then the C of Christmas, which is actually a K sound. And you just spell things out phonetically. So each one of these is like a phonetic sound that is matched to a specific place in your timeline. 133, 35, 37, etc. So it just was analyzing the soundtrack. I did that first before I even got started because it was just going to make my life easier. It would be a way to plot out my scene and decide what the scene is going to require. And so when I get in and start getting all creative, I don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. So that's, I'll just leave it up. So that's part of planning, is you go through and you do an analysis of what has to happen in your scene and what's required. And in this case, there was a soundtrack that was already pre-existing, and I had to make everything sync up to that. So it was real important that I went through and analyzed that first and made sure that I had that ready when the time came. And then after that, that's when I went through and I did all this CG reference stuff. And again, it was just reference. It was not meant to, I mean, I thought briefly, like I said, about animating it like this. It might have been kind of cute. There's a lot of cool stuff I got out of this with the blink and the head turns. Oh, there you go. I don't want to play it out loud. So anyway, but after looking at this and looking at the live action 3D version, I was like, yeah, that's not what I want this to be. And I'm not real strong with rendering things and building my own assets. And I figured that's going to take as long as it would to just draw the stupid thing. And so I decided to go ahead and draw it. And then I think I might have a layer where I was like, well, what I'll do is I'll trace it off. I'll rotoscope it, and I'll use that as my next. No, I don't have that anymore. But I tried doing that for a while. Thought, well, I'll just trace it off and rotoscope it and still try and go for this really smooth, solid character animation that you might see in a feature film. But again, it just wasn't the right time. That's just not going to happen. I don't have the wherewithal to do that these days. So then I decided at that point to start doing some basic production. So after you've done the planning, then your next thing that you might consider yourself going into is now you're going into the production phase. So the production phase is basically you're going to start making your thing come to life. You're going to actually start drawing. And by drawing, that means that you've done everything else. You don't have to start all over again and plan things. You can actually be in production. And that's when I was on productions. In production meant that the animation had already begun. They were already starting to paint the backgrounds. They were starting to even do some cleanup stuff with characters. Now, production doesn't necessarily mean you're going yet, because there's still a lot of stuff to do before you get started. And one of the things that I ended up doing was creating layout. So aside from just doing a layout, but creating a layout background, a temporary background that I could use. So when I'm animating, I have something to animate to. And so I sort of mapped out this playing field. And I'll be honest, I didn't put a lot of thought into it, but you can see just here that I had come up with the idea that, well, this is how, how high the character's wall is going to be. Like the dog's got his arms over the wall, or hers, I don't know what it was. So there's that. But then I also came up with like an overlay, which I don't know that I actually used in the end. Well, I certainly hadn't used it at this point, but I used, here we go, that's I'm not getting anything. So, so I came up with an overlay. I'll put this behind, oh no, I'll put the drawing on top. So just to kind of map out where the playing field was. And if I just isolate that, so that's what it looked like. That's what my layout was. Pretty crummy, huh? But I knew that that was all I needed. I just needed to know what the window was for the characters, so that I could draw within it and determine, well, where is the dog going to have to be, where the other dog's going to have to be, and then what else would come. And then I thought, well, and so then the stand itself would be like this. And while I was doing that, oh, by the way, hey, Jordan, nice to see you again. I'm talking about short films today. And this short project that I just finished mostly. And what I determined while I was doing this was this worked great for a close-up, but how was I going to do it for the entire film? Was I going to have individual separate shots? Because I had a bunch of separate shots when I did my storyboards, basically, which is part of the planning stage I was talking about before. I thought it's going to zoom in on a character sitting in the middle of the snow in a stand, and then it's going to go into a close-up of this sad dog singing his sad song, and then probably it's going to zoom back out again so you could see that there were other dogs in the scene, so they would all come up from out of nowhere, and then probably finish off with a wide shot followed by a close-up of a cute cat going meow. So I knew that I had to have all of those layouts. Did I want to do a bunch of different backgrounds, or did I just want to do one background and zoom in and out of it and conserve a lot of time and energy? And so that is indeed what I ended up doing. Was I thought, well, I'll just make one big layout, and I will then I can spare myself from having to do a new painting for every single, or background painting for every single shot, or rearranging painting background. For every single shot, I can just have one and zoom in and out and be done with it. And again, I don't do backgrounds. I'm not good at it. I'm not a good painter. Not the worst either, but it's just not where I live. So I knew I was going to take some Shutterstock art and maybe tweak it a little bit and make it my own. But at this point I thought, well, so am I going to continue with this layout, or do I need to have one that's different? And I thought, well, no, this is perfect because this will be as close as it'll ever get. Now, I ran into a little bit of trouble with that. If you watch the actual piece, the last shot is a cat and the cat's face, and the cat's kind of blurry because I zoomed in too tight. Who cares? This was just for fun. I'm not going to go bankrolling my career on something like this. It was just something quick to do. But that is an example of something you want to figure out at this stage in the layout before you start. I mean, you're in production, you're actually drawing it, but you want to make sure and work that stuff out so it doesn't come back and grab you later and make your life crazy. Then another part of production was I did my first cleanup of the actual character. And part of coming up with the character for the main character was just thinking, well, I can't do what I originally wanted to do, which was, like I said, this lush live action, lush Disney-ish looking dog animation. It's like, I just can't do that. Well, so what can I do? And out of that came this design, which was based on a couple things. One, it's very simple. If it has no eyes, if it's just black circles for eyes, then I don't have to worry about the eyes moving all around. If I had done my original design, which would have been something more like this, which I just did it a minute ago, then I would have had to deal with a lot more detail. It would have been a lot cuter, probably. It would have been a lot more fun and a lot more of an example of animation, if I'd done something a little closer to what I was thinking of in the first place. But again, just not feasible, not something I had the time and energy for. So I thought spendthrift. Imagine this is costing money. And I often tell my students, if you watch a movie like Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is something I worked on, every single element of the characters in that film cost money. If the bad guy had a ring that looked like this, which he did, Frollo, then, and it had a little edge inside of it, all that cost money. Each line cost a certain amount, and he had a few. He had another one that was, if I remember right, it's been a few years since I drew this, but he had another one that was kind of oddly shaped, round but not completely round. And then there was another one too, I think he had on the other hand. Anyway, so he had all these rings. Each one of those cost X amount of money, and each detail on Frollo, and the other one I remember well was Miguel from Hotel Dorado. And I was friends with the person who was in the cleanup head, and he kind of informed me just how much these things cost. I'm not going to share that, but each detail costs money. And in the case of you're making your own short film, it isn't that it costs you money, but it is going to cost you time and energy. And so do I have the time to go in here and make like little dots around the collar of a dog? Well, it's a lost dog anyway, so it doesn't have a collar. Or do I want to put like the whiskers markings on his face, or all of that stuff's going to cost money. How about if I make his brows a little bit uneven, or give him eyelashes and really go for the, I don't know, he looks like he's got makeup on. But each one of those thoughts it's going to cost money. I'm going to have to do this character over and over and over again. What can I do to make my life easier and make sure it gets done? So I came up with the idea of doing it in a very limited way. I thought, well, I can make the body just a very simple shape. I can separate the paws onto another layer and only show the paws instead of the arms, which is my original idea. And then I can make the head a separate element. And within that, I can also make the ears and the nose and the mouth and the eyes separate elements too, and just keep it as simple as possible. And then I can rotate them all using Toon Boom's motion feature. So the motion feature in Toon Boom is I could create an object, let's say, for example, an ellipse, which is exactly what I did do here. I can create a shape and then I can animate it by just moving it around or reshaping it. So I can animate it from here to here and it's going to move. Let's see if I can actually do that. So I don't know what layer I'm on at this point. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if I go from here to here, so I'll extend the frame range a little bit. Extend the exposure, let's just say like 24 frames. And then from here to here, I'm going to move this. Well, all I have to do is make the first frame a key. So insert a keyframe. And I've already got motion turned on. So go to frame 10, isolate the thing, and then just move it. And I guess I don't have it turned on. Oh, make that a key as well. And now I've got to go back and move this one back. Sorry, didn't do that right. So anyway, but you can see what it does. It's like I'm just moving. I'm just going to be moving the thing from one side to the other there. So now I will set motion keyframe and then move this one last time. That should do it. Let's see if it's doing it or not. Nope, still not doing it. I didn't do this right. I wouldn't have done it this way, but I'll just do it again real quick if it doesn't work. But you get the idea. The idea is that it's vectors. So I'm working with vectors, and by working with vectors, I can quickly and easily animate something in motion and not have to draw it every single time. So I'll do this one more time. We got the first one here. Make sure that's a keyframe, and then go to this one. Yeah, I don't even know if it's going to work this time, but I'll show you how it worked on the final project. So if you don't believe me, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing right. So watch what happens. I'm going to turn off everything on the dog except for its head shape. And let's see if I can even remember what it was. Yeah, there it is, vector head. So I'll just turn on the vector head so you can see, maybe you'll be able to see that the head, let's start out where it's moving. The head is rocking and rolling and rotating around. And all I did was I drew some highlights on it. Didn't even do a very nice job, but drew highlights and then a shadow. But the thing is actually just animated, so it just moves. I didn't redraw anything, and that just saved me hours and hours and hours of time to have it just animated like that as a vector object, which harkens back to the old days of Flash animation. Thanks, Jordan. Didn't make you cry. I like your emoji. And then after that, so I had already just kind of put the character together, but here's what its body looked like. So you can see it was just this kind of lumpy shape, and I just knocked it out as fast as I could. And then I added feet to it, and then I added the vector head, and then eventually I added eyes. And the eyes, it was just a matter of making sure that they traveled along with the body. So the eyes are just a separate level in and of themselves. So it's just this level that is been motion tweened so that they just move from frame to frame via keys. But because they are sitting on top of the vector head, they look like they're going with the head. And I had to go in there and do a little bit of keyframing here and there to make sure that they matched up right. But certainly it took me a lot less time to do it this way than it would if I had been animating the whole thing with keyframes, which I did do some keyframe animation in the scene, and I'll show you that shortly. But the point is at this point I was just plotting the thing out and making sure it was doable. And so I added a nose, same thing, it's just one single object. And if I get rid of some of these other things, you can see, if I get rid of the eyes, you can see that I just animated the nose so it travels with the face. You can see there it actually doesn't work quite right. The head, and I'll zoom in really tight so you can see this and see how cheaply and quickly I did this. You can see that the head rocks, but the nose does not. That the head is moving and the nose is kind of not moving, or at least not moving as much. Which isn't good, which isn't nice. I would never try to get away with that in the production. You can see it's not even drawn that well. It's real scratchy. But again, I was just trying to get this thing out as quickly as I could. So the eyes are added. Then I added the ears, and I just drew them on the first frame and then morphed them using motion tween after that. So for the left ear, it would get bigger and smaller at times, or switch places, and that's just keyframing an object that was already there. So you can see that the ears don't quite match up, but guess what? Most people aren't going to notice that when it's playing at speed, and I was willing to take that chance. Again, if I was doing real animation, if I was really going to go in there and make this look sweet, I would never have let it go like that. But the honest truth is I can't imagine anyone notices. Also, I had already done my scene planning. I knew that the first thing that was going to happen in this, if you've actually watched it, you can click on the link if you haven't. It's going to be covered in snow. And I worked on the scene in Prince of Egypt where Moses' face was covered in sand. We drew like hundreds of drawings of Moses' face in close up for a feature film, on a huge screen. And you don't see it because it's all buried in sand. So that taught me. I've got some snow, I've got some lighting effects in the scene, the final scene. I didn't need to worry about too many little details like this, but you should do as I say, not as I do. Peter's animation, you ask, is it always important to have storyboard and animatics before making a 3D short? At least storyboards, if you have the wherewithal, if you have the means, for Peter's animation, if you have the means to do an animatics pass, you'll be grateful later. You'll be thankful that you did, because it can make or break. You can find out right away that your project is or is not working if you've analyzed it through animatics, if you've done a pass on it beforehand, and you can troubleshoot all sorts of problems. So that's why they do it, is they're trying to do a sneak preview of what it might look like. So you can do it without. One of my favorite directors was well, no, that's not true. He used storyboards. Anyway, enough of that. But yeah, you need to do storyboards, and you need to be able to see your project and see whether it's working at the storyboard pass. So if you can do animatics, if you're savvy enough to do that, if you got the right programs, which the Adobe Suite, Adobe Cloud is really good for that sort of thing, because there's a lot of cool programs in there. Then you can test your material out before it works. I used to have to test my material out on a Moviola. Well, not used to. I did it once before going to digital, but we would just sit there and look on it, a little machine. Moviola was a little metal machine with a little tiny window. And sometimes it'd play at speed and sometimes it wouldn't. And that's how we would figure out if the scenes were working, if the movie was working. And fortunately, we don't have to do that anymore, so you should take an advantage any chance you get and try to see how your project is working before you commit to the production stage officially. So here we are in production on this particular piece of business. So I went through and I did this dog first, and I was very conservative as far as how much animation I was using. So you'll see that I got this dog up into this position where it's kind of going to be like howling at the moon and going ooh, because that's what happens in the song. You can see that I got it up there really quickly and cheaply, so you can see even the ear is a little bit penetrating into the head, but it's moving so fast nobody would even notice that unless you went frame by frame, which if anybody cares enough to go frame by frame through this and point out all the errors, I would be very flattered. I mean, don't. It's a waste of time. But I've had people go through my stuff and go frame by frame and go, you know, you missed this one frame. I'm like, wow, well, that's so cute. I'm flattered when people are that take it that seriously, because I certainly didn't when I made it. And I always say to my students too, it's like if you're going to cut corners, if you're going to cheap out on your in-betweens or something, as long as you own it, as long as you know the difference, you did it because you were out of time, out of energy, out of interest in your project, and said, I don't care about that. I'm just going to just get it done. And if I want to tweak it later, I will. And this project, you know, maybe I'll come back to it another time and fill in a lot of the stuff that was broken on it. I've done that before on projects. But this one, I just wanted, again, to get it out. So anyway, so I figured it out with the dog, how to get it to do everything that I wanted it to do. And then having done that, I did not do the mouth. I kept the lip sync for the very last thing. I think in terms of projects, you need to pace yourself and you need to do things in stages. And I thought it would be much more satisfying for me if I was able to do the other dogs first and get a feel for that, and then do the dialogue last, do the lip sync last. I feel pretty confident about lip sync, and I don't feel in a project like this it really mattered all that much anyway. It was always going to be real staccato, real stop motion, and never going to have that fluid look that a more complicated animation has. So I just was going to plug in mouse shapes and call it a day and then put it out there. So having done all the parts except for the mouth, let's take it off of here. Having done all of those parts except for the mouth, I was ready to move on to the next dog. Let's see, got some more things here. All right, there we go. Oh, look, everybody's already there. So the next dog that I did was not the little one, it was actually the big one. There's a big dog to the, let me turn off some of this stuff and just turn it on little by little. So let's turn all these things off and then turn them on bit by bit. So the next thing that I wanted to do was the bigger dog. And the reason for that was the bigger dog was a little bit more intensive than the third dog. And by doing them in that order, I was kind of saving myself. I was kind of doing the hardest stuff first and then the easier stuff next. So this was the dog design that I came up with outside of my scene. I determined where the dog comes in. I put the basis of the dog, the background of it, the character of it, all in one layer, and then just morphed it on by using motion tweens. So you see it's not doing anything. It just comes up, it goes down. And if you look at the layout overlay, if you take that off, you'll see even more clearly. I just have it come up, I have it come down. It wasn't even on the screen, and then it just kind of comes up and comes down. If you're really eagle-eyed, well, even if you're not, you'll see that the final design I used for the background and the layout, there are slats, and you can see that the dogs don't continue down past the slats, that it's you can see the elements in the background coming up and down behind them. Again, I don't know, who cares? I didn't. If you do, then let's talk. Maybe you can get a job doing animation, but because you've got a good eye. But for my purposes, I just wanted to get the dog on there, and then having gotten it on there, leave it there for a while. And then the last thing that these dogs do is they go ooh. And so let's open this up again. So if we go all the way to the end of the scene, they're in this shape. So I actually did sort of keyframe, animate this frame by frame. I was like, well, come on, I can do a little bit at least. And I couldn't think of an easier way to get the dog up into that shape. Now you can see that the one in the center, this one, all it really is it's a vector sphere that's been colored in, and it's on top of a vector object or just a drawn object, and then there are two overlays of the hand. So it's just these three parts, and I just vector animated the head. But the other one, it's got all this fluff and all these colors and things. So I actually had to get in there and do a couple frames. You'll see it was only a couple of frames. I was taking a cue from Charlie Brown's Christmas, where they're singing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" at the end, and I watched it a lot over the years, obviously. And the amount of frames it took for them to go up into that expression, which is this is basically kind of an homage, I guess you'd call it. It kind of sounds pretentious, but it's doing the same thing. And so I thought, well, they only do it like in 2 frames. If I was going to do this for real, I would have anticipation, I would have some overlap, but in this case, I just have the dogs coming up and coming down with very little effort. So there's one drawing in between the pose, and I reused it. So they go up and then they go down using the same exact drawings. And again, that just is its own particular style of limited animation, something I grew up with a lot when I was a kid. And so I find it charming. I think that limited animation can be really fun and charming. There's a DIY aspect to it, and that's what I was kind of trying to do with my pieces. I mean, that's what I'm talking about tonight, is you could do your own animation short with very little effort if you set your mind to it and get clever. So you can see the in-betweens aren't even that good now that I look at it. It's like he loses a lot of volume in his jaw. So it's kind of funny. And then, of course, I didn't have a mouth on, so I was going to do all the mouths at the last minute. But I knew what the thing looked like. I'd drawn it outside. And I also was able to put more detail into the character because it doesn't have to do much. Whereas the center dog, his head's bobbing and moving all around. So I kept the detail to a minimum. But with this dog, I only had to do 3 drawings. And so I was able to put a lot more thought. And the ears don't look too bad. They kind of look like they're in between okay. But it's pretty it's pretty simple. Not something that I would go around boasting and say, oh wow, yeah, look at the great animation I did. It was done on the cheap, and I don't apologize for it. I just I acknowledge it. All right, and then the next one I did was this dog. So take it back a little bit. So this was their kind of hero pose. And so again, the idea was, the idea was that there's a lead dog, and then there's a dog with a deep voice, and then one that has a high squeaky voice. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny and kind of sad? It's like this scruffy little dog, and it's missing an eye. And again, if I take the overlay off, you can see I only drew it down to there, and it just shows up, just pops on screen. But because I used the overlay layout, you can see the thing. It just kind of slides on in. I actually was thinking of this. I was over Halloween. I was watching. There's a cartoon with what's his name? I always forget names when I come here. Sylvester the cat, and I think it's Porky Pig, and they're hanging out in a haunted hotel. And at one point, it's just crazy. Sylvester the cat gets abducted by mice in the basement, and when he shows up again, his face is all white and he looks like a zombie, and he's walking around and he just kind of goes like he's had something really terrible done to him. Those Warner Brothers cartoons are really quite adult in their way, but I always thought that was hilarious, and so I kind of drew inspiration for this one. I thought this poor little dog has probably really been through the ringer, and happily has found a home with the other dogs inside of this little shelter in the snow. And maybe I'll do a sequel sometime where I show that the lonely dogs are lonely no more, and they've all found homes. But anyway, so that was the next place that I found. I did this dog, and you can see I put a lot of detail into this one because, again, it doesn't have to do too much. And even though there's snow and it's never going to be in close-up, I could put more detail into it because I wasn't going to animate it. And then the last one I call the layer les autres. For some reason, it's always stuck with me ever since I took French in college about 1.5 million years ago. The others, all the rest. And so there's another layer that just pops on of all the extra dogs. And if you look without the overlay, you can see that I hit it down below. And this actually became problematic when I did the final background because I made them a little too wide. I think I had to fit them in. Maybe I had to adjust them a little bit. But it's just a layer with all sorts of dogs on it. And by the end, they're all supposed to just be barking and yipping. And you're supposed to get the impression that there are a lot more dogs than just these 3 that were hiding inside of the shelter. And isn't that terribly sad and cute or something? I don't know. And so in this case, I don't know if it was the right idea or not, but it was one of the last things I did artistically. And I just said, you know what, I am not going to draw all the dogs. I'm just going to give you the impression that there are dogs in the scene and let your imagination fill in the rest. And I thought if I muted it enough with the lighting, that you wouldn't really notice that I hadn't drawn them all. It looks a little bit like a big lump of coal at this point, but you get the idea. And again, it was never meant to be a work of art. It was just supposed to be something kind of cute and fun and a quick one-off. And they weren't supposed to take away from the initial dogs. So you notice I made them really dark so that your eye is drawn to the center characters, the thing that's the action focus of the scene. So now that we've got all that set up, I'll show you what it looked like at that point and continue to discuss it. So at that point, I just looked at the main animation and just thought, with the sound on, and thought, well, is this doing what I wanted it to do? Is everything working out the way I've planned? Are there any issues that are coming up? Is anything going to cause me any problems? And it's really important to do that, is to work in steps and not approach your animation as if, okay, that was it, it's done. Ordinarily, if I was really going to animate this for real, if I had gone that route, I would have done a rough pass of the animation for this. But there's so little animation in this to begin with. It's all vector-based shapes just moving across the screen. There's no reason to go through and sketch it all out and rough it out. And at that point, time was money. Not that this cost anything, but it was, I did not have a lot of time to do this. I knew, nor did I have energy. So I thought, well, I'm not going to rough this out. I'm just going to go ahead and go straight through and make sure that this is working at this stage, and then I'll go in and start filling in the details. The green screen is on. Turn that off. There we go. So once I had that all set up, then it was time to go in and start addressing the mouths. And so that goes back to what I was saying before. Oh, well, before I go too much further, I might mention that one of the things I determined at this point, I originally had this dog's feet connected to its body. So right now the feet are on another layer, and you can see that if I go ahead and just get rid of the feet. And what I did is because it didn't work initially, I had them both on one layer. So I had actually gone, and talk about lazy, I just kind of carved out part of the temporary layout for the background. Just carved it out so that it could all be on one layer. But then I thought, oh, come on, just separate them onto a separate layer so that they go in front of the overlay and the dog is behind. So little things like that came about as a result of going through the scene and just working it, but not doing any real final art, just playing around with it a lot, and then determining that I had to separate stuff out more into layers. But once I had all that worked out, the timing of it, worked with the music, and then I could look at this and kind of go, yeah, that's the level of animation I wanted. No more, no less. I don't want a lot more than that. I want it to be real choppy and staccato and simple and kind of childlike. Then I was ready to go through and do the mouths. So I started with the toughest one first, which was the main dog. The main dog had to do much more singing than the others. And so it's the 3, which I don't even know. It's the first dog, number 1, his mouth is right here. And so I found well, first of all, I started out with its shape in a neutral position. And then I went and did what, I mean, I had already done what I told you about, which is I had analyzed all the lip sync and figured out which mouths go where, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then I went and, I mean, I've got all these already, but I went and looked at one of those handy dandy dialogue charts that you can find all over the internet. And I'll just pull that one up right now, just so you can see. If you type in the word dialogue, I should do this on screen, but I never quite know what I've got up on web browsers or what I've been looking at recently. I don't want something odd to appear. But if you type in dialogue chart animation and you click on images, what you'll find is you get a bunch of options. And in this case, it's not the best. Well, here's one where it says earthworms live on the ground. This one's a good one, but I'm going to try another one. I'm just going to say mouth chart animation, because what I'm really looking forward to is mouth shapes. There we go. That's the one I was looking for. So mouth chart animation or mouth shapes animation. And you get one of these, and this is great for limited animation. Phoneme mouth charts, that's another good one. To whomsoever created these, thank you. I'd like to give complete credit to anybody who created these that I'm showing right now, so we don't get into trouble or anything. But these are all over the internet, and you can find them, and you should have one handy. I happen to have one that I use all the time. I think it's one of these, this one that says mouth chart, and that will show you very specific mouth shapes that are kind of generic, while at the same time they're very useful. And you can use these mouth shapes as a starting point to just slug into a scene. Now in my case, I didn't go any further than that, but what you should do if you're going to do animation, even if it's a simple animation like what I did, you should think of how your shapes go in between. So between this M here on the left and then the S or T or CH below it, you know, something's going to have to happen between those two shapes. You don't just go from one to the next to the next. There is a specific style where you just go from one to the next and it's very choppy and staccato. Guess what? That's what I decided to use for mine. But for animation that's worth its pedigree, then you want to in between that. And I've talked about dialogue before, and I will definitely talk about lip sync and dialogue again in the near future. But for now, it's enough to know that you just want to find yourself a mouth chart and consider using these as starting points for the different mouth shapes that you can then slug into your animation in Toon Boom. And one of the nice things about Toon Boom is you can designate specific letters. For example, here you can add notes to the X sheet. This is an exposure sheet. And you can add notes to this. If I remember right, it's like you right mouse and then mark drawings. Or I know there's a better way to do this, but I haven't done it in a long time and I don't use it that often. So, but you can mark things up so that you can say, well, this is an S shape. And instead of putting a 1 there, then it'll put an S there. And then every time you want an S, you just have to copy that frame and it'll say S on your X sheet. And so you don't even have to mark this X sheet up too much. You go in and just designate those mouth shapes. Now, again, I didn't do that. I did this so fast, I didn't even think about marking it up. I wasn't really thinking in terms of doing this as a dialogue example, more like just how do you knock out a little animation scene really quickly. But I did spend a lot of time analyzing the dialogue and then going in and slugging in the mouth shapes. When I say slugging in, it's just an old word we used to use. I'm not even sure where it comes from, but it was, we would always talk about slugging things in, slates, mouth shapes, slugging in another drawing. It's an old-fashioned word. Like I said, I don't even know where it came from, but that is what I would do next. And so next thing I did was I went in and just started adding mouths. So starting with the neutral mouth, went in and listened to, I'll just play this, scrub through it a little bit more, but sound on. So there you go. So the character, they just used the actual phonemes that were on the soundtrack. And then just made sure that everything synced up properly. Thanks, JD. Yeah, well, it's a compromised pooch, cheap looking pooch. But thank you. So I just went through and did that for the entirety of the scene. So I'll just play it, let it play without the sound. And you can see that I was just slugging in mouse shaped, and then I'd actually just flip them. Or actually, you know what? I think I just drew every single one of them. At that point, I just thought it was faster to just draw them than to go and do a lot of copying and pasting. Again, if I really cared, I would have copied and pasted them to make them look a lot more uniform. With animation, it's all about making shapes and lines and things look like they're uniform and that they're all connected. And you don't want things to look like they're separated. You don't want this to look like it's a bunch of individual mouse shapes flashing on the screen. You want to make it look like it's the character's mouth. So if I had cared enough, if I was really intent on making this, award-winning animation or something, then I would have gone through and addressed some of that stuff. But I didn't. I really just wanted to get it done as quickly as possible, like I've said now 17 times. I'm going to stop it right at 1096 and let it just play out over and over and over, so you can just kind of see the work that went into it. So anyway, so that was what I did. The first pass was just using these generic shapes that I got off of a mouth chart, and I didn't in between them. I didn't think too much about them. I just locked them in. I did, however, go back and check them. The first time I did it, it didn't quite line up right. And this is something that you need to think about when you're doing dialogue or lip sync, is it has to look right and not just to you. And you should show it to someone. And I mean, I've done this about 1.5 million times, so I was like, it's close enough. But when you're just getting started with lip sync, you have to spend a lot of time observing it and showing it to other people and making sure that they see it the same way you do. Many was the time, and particularly in CG animation, where I was doing a lot of intensive dialogue scenes where my supervisor and I wouldn't agree. They'd say, change it, maybe do this instead. And I'd just go, yeah, that's fine, doesn't cost me anything. But it'd be like, that is not how I intended it to look. But as long as it still looks like the character's talking, you're in good shape. And that's the philosophy I use for this, is if the mouth is only going open and shut, it still probably would have looked like it was talking. And so I didn't spend a whole lot of time working on lip sync. Just slugged it in, set it, and forget it. Like the dog in the left, spirit animals, the Big Lebowski. That's funny. Thanks, JD. Yeah. Maybe it is. I think it's a Warner Brothers influence. Like everything I do is kind of Warner Brothers. I don't know, JD, if you were not here earlier, I was saying the little dog that's missing an eye was based on Sylvester the cat being scared and turned into a zombie in one of the Haunted House Bugs Bunny cartoons that I just watched again for the millionth time. So anyway, so after I finished up with the one dog, the hardest dog, the most difficult dog rather, which was the center one, the one that does most of the singing. And for anyone who's joined me, the link to this is at the very beginning of the chat. I will include it. In fact, I'll just include it right now in case anybody hasn't seen it lately. I will include it. Well, hi, Riz Animation. Nice to see you again. It's always a pleasure. And thank you for supporting these streams. We appreciate it. So here, I've just included the movie again. So if you're just joining us, then you can see what I've been working on for this live stream. Anyway, so once I'd done the first mouth, which was the most difficult one, it was a matter of just kind of copying that for the others. And so the next one I did was the big dog. Dog number 2, I just called it that. It's really important to label things, by the way, when you're doing layers like this. If you I'll pull this so you can see. Hopefully you can see that all of my stuff is labeled. That's one thing I actually did do well. The top one is just drawing, because that's just, I'm using that to do editorial comment. But right now, but everything else has been labeled in a way that at least I could understand what it was. It's so important to do that. And I just Even I don't do it enough. And I know my students, it takes them a while to kind of figure that out, because it's counterintuitive. You think, well, I'm drawing, I'm working, and I want to just get on with it. And then sometimes my students will line things up with color coding and everything. And there is, you can go too far, and you're spending all your time doing that. But the more organized you are, the better off you're going to be later. So labeling everything is a really good idea. All right, so then the second dog joins, and we'll turn that mouth on again. Dog, there we go. So now that I had the first mouth set up, I knew that I just had to copy the same phonemes that the first mouth was doing and do it with the style that this second dog's mouth was in. But you may notice they don't line up perfectly. They're actually a little bit offset. And I did that on purpose so that they don't look too similar, so they're not too samey, so they don't move in exactly the same time. In any scene that has more than one character, you have to avoid twinning two characters in the same way that you avoid twinning with your animation in general. For example, twinning, what is it? Well, that's, I've got my character standing like this, and the body is completely linear. It's like here, it's Mr. Gingerbread Man, right? Mr. Gingerbread Man, you can cut him right down the center and eat him, yes, but you don't really want that. What you want to do is, because that's a really flat, unimaginative, uninteresting drawing. Better still, if Mr. Gingerbread Man is actually a person, is actually standing at a bit of an angle and is kind of off center a little bit, and you can see some perspective of some sort, something a little bit more like that. So that's twinning in posing, but twinning in animation action is, let's say I've got a character who's standing like that, and both of these hands are moving at the exact same time, up and down. Well, that's twinning in action, and so in animation. And so these characters, if both of their mouths were moving at the exact same time, that would be twinning. And so I specifically offset them just a little bit so that they were not synced up exactly. So I'll let that play. Looks like you guys are all going to town and comments. You can please subscribe to your YouTube channel. I'll check it out and take a look. JD, just having an important conversation earlier about Wile E. Coyote, the road running near the others. Like makes solution because not sure tastes good. Well, didn't you ever see the Wile E. Coyote cartoon where he explains to the two little kids on TV why he actually is in love with? Well, here, let me see what else you said. Did he eat a roadrunner before? So why is he using the same technique to catch his arch rival? Scott? And yeah, the insider info. Well, I mean, it's not insider, but there's a Wile E. Coyote cartoon. I don't remember the name, where where there's two little kids, two little Chuck Jones, the cutest little, they look like Cindy Lou Who. The one's wearing a cowboy hat, and the other one is, and they're just sitting there like zombies watching TV. It was the 50s, and TV was still new, but it was already taking over the world. And one of them, he's very memorable. He turns to the other and he goes, "I really like the Roadrunner because he goes beep beep zip dang." It's funny when the kid does it, but in that cartoon, if I remember right, that's the one where Wile E. Coyote has an English accent when he spoke. Whenever he spoke, he would always say, "I'm Wile E. Coyote, super genius." And so he goes on a long rant describing what the Roadrunner tastes like. And he's actually got a map. So he uses visual aids. And so for here, like say it's the leg bone, he goes through and he describes it. And he says this part, and it's drawn up like they used to draw in quarter meats. So it's like these little dotted lines, and each one of them is a different category. He goes, "This one tastes like chocolate ice cream. This one tastes like parfait." He just goes on and on and on. Again, it's much funnier when he does it, when Mel Blanc does the voice. And he describes each part of the Roadrunner and how delicious it tastes, which implies two things. One, he got that info from somewhere, and two, he probably has tasted one before, if he knows that much about it. But I'm willing to suspend disbelief and say that he only heard it, because what bird ever tasted like chocolate ice cream? And so he's just determined that he's going to prove whether or not they taste as good as they seem. I also, when I was a kid, I believed he was starving. Like he was just out in the middle of the desert. He's scrawny. And even though the bird is scrawny too, it's still food. It's still an animal. As to what the real insider info is how do they come up with it and all that? I don't know. I have no clue. I'm old. I'm not that old. I don't know that stuff. And I never really studied Bugs Bunny cartoons. The more I got to know them, the less infatuated I was with them. You know, part of what I like about Bugs Bunny is how weird it is and how off the wall and just out of control. And the more and more I get to know about how these things came about, the less magical it kind of seems. So I'm content to leave it there. But yes, there is definitely a Wile E. Coyote cartoon from the 50s where he goes through and demonstrates what a Roadrunner would taste like and how different each of the parts of the Roadrunner tastes. And he's slobbering and making a big fuss about it. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that answers the question. It's about as insider as I can get. But that's an excellent question. Goes back to the whole thing from, what was it, Stand By Me, the 80s film, where they were speculating, if Goofy's a dog, what's Pluto? So she knew this 5 hours ago. I'm going to save $20. Thanks. Yeah, we'll look it up. Like I said, it's the one with the 2 kids sitting in front of the tube. All right, so next thing I did with this is then I went ahead and I finished off the mouth for the little dog. So that was dog 3. Again, I was quick to label everything appropriately. And the little dog was the easiest of all because it was the last thing to come on. And then once I had that, and then you'll see too that the little dog, its mouth is also a little bit out of sync with the others. If I've done my job. It's going to pop up here in a second. And even though it's limited animation, that's one thing that would help. If they were all moving at the exact same time, it would just look one step cheaper. You can see I didn't put a lot of thought into these mouths. I really did it quickly. I gave them big tongues for anytime they were doing a TH sound. That comes from, there was a cartoon that Bakshi initiated a reboot of Mighty Mouse, which if you like crazy cartoons, you owe it to yourself to find it. Mighty Mouse from the 80s, or Mighty Mouse Ralph Bakshi, or Spumco, or Chris Felucci. He helped with that, made it what it was. And whenever they talk, their tongues would be sticking out a mile. And that's kind of where I got the philosophy for some of this stuff. Unfortunately, I'm not Bob Camp. I can't draw like that, that cool Atomic Age, grotesque Ren and Stimpy style that's so fun. I only have my style and I own it and I like it and I don't care. But that's where I got the idea to kind of over enunciate some of the mouth expressions. And Mighty Mouse was about as cheap as it gets. And that's the philosophy for the reboot of Mighty Mouse was, hey, it doesn't matter if the character is even on model as long as their eyes and the nose and the colors are right. And of course, again, you know, they had Bob Camp. I think he's the designer. I mean, he's the one who came up with that look. And Chris Felucci. One or the other or both. And so they were there helping to keep things, you know, quality control. But it taught me, it's like, well, those mouths were just moving on 4s and you still got the idea that it was dialogue, but that they would always have their tongue sticking out. So I did that for this, just for my own personal insider joke. And then once I did that, so that was basically all the animation. And so now things get a little trickier. I'm not really going to share this because it'll be opening too many programs. But what I will say is that after this, I started moving out of this program and into other programs. So, well, Elf, I'm glad that you can't wait to get into the enrollment. It's a great place. And there are a lot of different things you can do in CG Spectrum, as well as 2D animation. But what I did next with this one was I separated, well, they're already separated on layers. And so I ran each one of these off as its own layer. I won't show you that, but take my word for it. I ran each one off, each element, except for the overlay, which I wasn't going to use. It was just a temp thing to use for a while. So I ran each of the elements off onto a layer, and then I composited it. It's a fancy way of saying I collected everything in After Effects. And so once it was in After Effects, I noticed a couple things. It was difficult to get this run off into a format that After Effects liked, that worked with Toon Boom. And what I ended up doing, if you look really close in the final video, you can see it, was as I created a green screen for everybody, well, just for the background, and put everybody in front of all the characters in front of a green screen. Zip up here, you can see, well, anyway, so by putting it on a green screen, then when I got it into After Effects, I was able to, there we go, was able to just key out the green, just like they do in live action films. And this is something that I don't teach in my 2D animation class. I have taught After Effects. I'm hardly a master at it, but I'm pretty good at it after a while, after having taught it a few years, just the basics of it. And I knew that I could just put this on a green screen and then key out the green and then dither with the edges of it a little bit. And in that way, I would be able to put each of the layers into After Effects on its own layer, and then start messing around with how it looked visually. And so now that we're at that stage, I'll just kind of go through the piece itself and just show you a few things of what I did. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's a little outside the zone. And again, please feel free to comment at any time about anything, if you want to ask questions about the Roadrunner, for example. But so anyway, so what I did is I compiled them all here. First of all, I made my final background, which is based on two elements. One was a background that I just, the woods is just something I grabbed from a free source. So just, free background, snowy. And then the little cabin, that was a cabin again that I got from a free download somewhere. I think I just typed in like free something or other for the image, and then I rebuilt it and got rid of some of the details so it looked like my own thing, and painted it a little bit here and there. And then I separated the background so that behind the dog I created a background with, I wish I could draw on the screen, but I can't remember how to do that. But with, well, actually, I could draw on it. Anyway, yeah, we got time. I'll just do this. It'll make life easier, probably, if I do it this way. It'd be more fun. Anyway, I will import this into the scene. You can do it like this. And I'll talk about it from that point. You can see what I did with the background that way. It might make it a little more fun. I'll just show you how I can separate things and get that off there. But anyway, it required a little bit of thoughtful planning, but that's why I planned stuff out in the first place, was so that I could not worry about all this stuff later. I planned it out so that I knew I was going to be using limited animation, limited resources, but there were still a couple of things that I wasn't quite sure about once I got it to this stage. And so after having gone through all of that, then I went through and put this stuff together after the fact. Let's get rid of the green. So what I was wanting to show you was just diagram a little bit how I broke it down. So these are the different layers that I used. There was one layer for the outside. I'll get a better pen than that so you can actually see. There was one layer for the outside, for this. There was a layer for this, and there was a layer for these things. And that became, this part here, and that became the front layer. I built those in Photoshop based on stuff that already existed. Oh, thank you, Jordan. And then, so that was all one layer. Get rid of that. Oop. And then after that, I created this layer and then the layer that's in the background. And then I made sure and put the layer with the with the sign on it on top, and then placed the layer that was in the background on the bottom, right? And then in between those, I had each one of the dogs, and it was really important to make sure that each one of the, oh, and by the way, yeah, of course I did the cat too. I did the cat last, but it went something like this. So there was the background first, and then next came the dogs that were hiding. That was next. And then next came probably, well, all three of these were on the same layer. So this, and this were all three on one layer. So that was number 3. Then after that was probably, this was number 4, and then this was number 5. And then the overlay, which was this, was number 6. And then I put them all together in After Effects so I could composite them, make sure that they all fit right. On top of that, in Photoshop, I had already made some determinations about a couple things so that I could work with this stuff when it was composited. So this little piece up here in the front, the snow was built into it. So the snow is part of the scene. You can actually see the edges of it. If you look really closely, you can see that this was all painted and meant to lay on top of the existing snow. So if I take that away and I zoom in real tight, you'll see, you can easily see where the edges of it are. But again, most people aren't looking at that when they watch this, if they watch it at all. So there you can see just a little bit of an edge here, which is where the artificial edge comes. And then the dogs were all kind of hiding behind. And this is where I said there's a slat right here. If you look closely, you'll see all the extra dogs that kind of rise up behind there, and you can see them inside of this slat. And it's like, well, where was the dog's body? Is it here? Well, then you'd have seen it. And where was the cat hiding? Was it here? You know, so again, it's cheap. It's just done for fun. I'm not trying to impress anybody with this. Just something that I'll show to my more understanding dog-loving friends, and I've already heard that they liked it a lot. So those, I don't want to do that. So those were the layers that I put everything onto. And then on top of that, I added yet another layer, which was the snow falling. You can see that if you watch the video. So there's a layer. I actually used the snow falling last week, but I realized it slowed down my visual. So I don't have it up this week because it makes my stream feed too slow and it freezes up. But trust me when I say that I found a snow layer, and in fact I can play it right now in the video. Again, you can click on the link to see this if you really want to see it that badly. But if I play it right now, you'll see that there is snow falling in front of the character. And then I add a little zoom in After Effects and obviously a transition between this first shot and then the second shot. But you can see that that's just an overlay of snow. It was done by keying out the black background of the snow. You can see edges around the snow because the snow was actually against a black background. And I keyed it out with After Effects, and so there's a little bit of residue left over, but I thought, it works. It's, again, for my purposes, I probably would have blurred it out or something. And I also probably would have put more layers so it looked more three-dimensional, but you know, really not that interested. So that was how I achieved the snow. And then the last thing that I did to it was I created some vignettes and treated the look of the picture. So the first thing to treat it was I just overlaid a blue color over the whole scene, so it's got kind of a snowy blue color, and that helped soften it, make it look a little bit more like production. And so you can see the difference between, if I can frame this up a little better, you'll see the difference between how, I mean, it's now it's out of focus because it's just a still, but you can see the difference between the softness of this, for example, and then perhaps the harshness of, find one of them, I'll just turn it off, the harshness of one of the other layers. See how harsh that looks, and just very vectory and very cheap. but with all that, with a blue filter over the top of it, it softened it up a little bit. It's also, again, it's out of focus, but because it's been blown up. But you can see it just kind of softened a little. And then the other thing I did to soften it was another real cheap and easy effect, which is I just vignetted the corners. So I put a black layer into After Effects and then cut out the center of it and then blurred the edges of it so that it has this. And further on in the little piece that I did, and I also did this, I put a light. So it was a black solid, and then I cut out a little section of it like this, and then blurred the edges of it like so. And so you see this little wash of light that they're sitting in. In fact, I'll point that out right now. We're getting to the end of this, so there we go. So it looks like there's this sort of, silvery light coming from, I don't know where. I mean, it's supposed to be like the moon or something. But it, it doesn't really match up with the other shots, but that wasn't the point. The point was just to give it sort of a feel. And so you feel like the dog is in this shimmery light, which you always see in Christmas movies and stuff. And then the rest of it falls into darkness. And then after having done that, I realized that the dogs in the background, the ones that are supposed to be just sort of generic crowd of dogs in background, that they were, you could see them a little too much, and they were looking a little bit too much like lumpy coal. And so I put another solid in the background layer in between the dogs, which were here, the hero dogs, if you will. So between this layer of dogs and then this layer of dogs, I just put a dark solid that put them into a little bit more darkness so that they were darkened up a little bit and a little bit less obvious that I hadn't drawn those dogs. I just kind of sketched them and scribbled them in. And then the last thing that I did was I kind of zoomed in and out. So that's what I was talking about before. With I just used After Effects. Normally I'd use Premiere or something, but for this it's just like, it went so fast that I actually was comfortable just zooming in for these close-ups and then using a really tacky kind of dissolve to zoom out to a wider shot after all three dogs appear, at which point the snow goes away. And then zooming in tighter for the cat. And it's like I said, if you look real closely at it, you'll see that the cat is kind of blurred out because I zoomed in too tightly. But by that point, I was done and ready to call it quits. And I think I blurred the back dogs a little bit too, so it's harder to see them. Just made them a little bit less obvious. But yeah, you can see all the pixeling, you can see all the pixels around the thing's ear and stuff. But again, no big deal. All right, so now I'm going to just let that play. And well, thank you, Jordan. Thanks. So now just let this thing play over and over and over again. Oh, there we go. And talk about this. So now let's say you've done a short film like this. Well, now what? You put it together, you're really happy with it. What am I going to do with this? So your options are the sky's the limit. You can put it on something like YouTube or Vimeo. You can share it with family and friends. You can put it on your reel. You can enter contests. None of these things are going to guarantee you that you get the fame and fortune that you may crave, if that's why you do these things. They are wonderful resources for sharing things. So in a case like this, I'm like, oh, well, I want to show you guys this project I've been working on. What better way to do it than just click on a YouTube link, which again, for anybody who's, if anybody for some reason is joining us at this hour, I'll put it up one more time now that we're almost done. But YouTube is a great way to put stuff up. Vimeo is another one. There are all sorts of resources nowadays where you can put things up online and share them with family and friends. But people will always say, well, what's the best way? What am I going to do to get noticed? And that's just, nobody can answer that question. You're going to have to, oh, night, JD. Thanks, appreciate it. Nobody can answer the question of what's the best format. There are even like websites, well, what's the best day to put something up on YouTube or whatever. It's like, there is no logic to it. If you have a following, you can be pretty sure that your following will probably follow you, and that's great, especially if you're providing them with what they wanted. Again, I know some YouTubers who provide regular entertainment, have built up a following, and they have advertising and stuff, and that's awesome. But for the rest of us mere mortals, you just put your stuff out there and you do the best you can, and if that's what you want to do. I think Facebook is a good resource. I'll probably put this on Facebook if I can bear it. Like I said, it's not something I mean, it's not an animation piece. It's really kind of silly and sad and it's over emotive. But I'm not ashamed of it either. But I'll probably put it on Facebook and share it with friends and family. I put it up on YouTube so anyone could watch it if they want. I put it on Vimeo, and I have a Twitter account. Put it up a few places just in case anyone's interested, but I'm not aggressively pushing this. If I was aggressively pushing it, I'd put it on my reel. I would share it with people that I know who are connected to the industry and get their opinions on it. They'd probably tell me to correct a bunch of stuff. I would then go correct a bunch of stuff and resubmit it and say, hey, do you like it? Do you think it's better? And keep it nagging and annoying people until they actually let me in the club. Hey, it's worked for some people. But I have some thoughts on that. One of the most important things is you're only going to get so many chances before you annoy people too much. And so you need to pick your battles. You need to make sure that you've brought your most important, best work, the one thing that you really, really accomplished 100%, and not show up until that has happened, because you won't get a lot of chances to show your work to people who are important, assuming you get to it all. But if you get an opportunity, like, I don't know, if Nickelodeon's looking for material, or if Netflix is looking for content, let's say you get a pitch meeting or something, you're not going to get a whole bunch of chances to do that, especially if you do a lousy one. They won't invite you back. And so you want to make sure you've done a lot of stuff for yourself first. You've done lots of little projects and created things and done a lot of trial and error, so that when you do finally get some chances, then you get an opportunity to show your best stuff. This is in no way, shape, or form my best stuff. This is just something I did for a laugh. If I was going to try and get a job doing animation or telling stories or doing any facet of the animation process, this wouldn't qualify. As much as I just had fun with it, that's all it was for. And so knowing yourself, knowing your abilities, and knowing the difference between stuff that is ready to go and stuff that's just exercises. All of us do exercises. We do them for fun. We do them to stay sharp. And then every now and then you do something that's really exceptional and really you knocked it out of the park and put all the time and energy into it that it required. That's what you show when you get your chance. And just think about it too, is while you're waiting for your opportunity, you're creating. You're doing all these projects and getting, Chuck Jones said you've got, I think 100,000 or maybe it was 1 million bad drawings in you. So let's get those 999,000 out of the way right now for the sake of your future employers and yourself and your friends and family. It sounds kind of harsh, but I get what he was saying. It's like get to it, and don't think that everything you create is exceptional. In terms of you're going to try and pitch it, you're going to put yourself behind it. Create stuff for the love of doing it. Put everything you got into everything you do, and then step back and assess what you've got and whether or not it is worthy of taking up somebody's time and energy to look at it and maybe do something with it. Or that's the other axiom of Hollywood, which is when you've actually got something that people want, they'll find you. And when you have something that Hollywood is interested in, Hollywood comes and finds you. And a lot of people I know who have been discovered, it's been a case where they had a project of some kind that they put out there, and then suddenly they had a following. And because they had a following, suddenly Hollywood or literary agents or agents of any kind, suddenly they're interested. I got hit up by agents when I was doing my musicals. I would get cards all the time saying, "Oh, you create things, you have IPs. Here's my card. Why don't we talk? Maybe you can pay me some business to represent you, or something. You can pay me some money to represent you." So anyway, but that all comes later. For now, your goal is to just make your dang movie, make your project, whatever it is, your piece of animation, whatever. Get it out there, get feedback, get people talking about you, and get them interested in what you're doing. And yeah, Jordan, we've all got a lot of bad drawings to go. I think I'm at 998,000 or something. I've got a long way to go myself. So there's no time like the present to get out there, create, and keep creating, and do things because you love it. To circle back around, I started at the beginning talking about, well, why do you make a short? Why would you make an animation project? It's because you love what you do, and you do what you love, and you can't imagine not doing it. You're not trying to make money. You're not trying to become rich and famous. If those things happen as a result of it, good for you. Lucky you. And it usually is luck that makes that happen. But for the rest of the time, you're doing things because you just really, really love it. I had a great time making this silly little thing. I wish I had the wherewithal and the time and energy and the interest in doing it to the level I would love to do a short at one of these days. I still haven't gotten there. But I had fun doing what I did, and that's what it was for. I did it for the fun, and I'm sharing it for the fun and to encourage you to do things for fun. And the more things you do for fun, the closer and closer you're getting to that goal of doing something that's really exceptional, whether by your own standards or by anybody else's standards. It's really something that is noteworthy, and maybe it gets you a job, maybe it gets you accolades. All that is just rewards for a job well done, but it doesn't stop you from going out there and just doing stuff and having fun. So yeah, so go ahead and just go out there and do it. And if you flop, if it fails, if it isn't what you want, then do it again and just keep doing it. And that's what we all did. I told you, I made easily 30 short animated films, and not one of them could I show you. Not one of them would I show you. And I spent a lot of money on them, a lot of time. I believed every single one of them could be that one that was my namesake, that made me. And none of them did. And then eventually when I did do some short films that were decent, they played in film festivals and such, it was because I'd already gotten all those films out of my system. 30 plus films, short ones, but films. And then just learned as I went. So same thing for you. Get out there and just do it and show us all how it's done. So I'm going to now wrap things up. We got Santa back here to help us usher in the end of another stream today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about making short films, and look forward to hearing about the things that you create. Jordan, appreciate it. Glad that you got something out of it. I will return one more time next week with our regularly scheduled program. We'll be working on a scene. I've got some things that I'm finishing up to share for next week, and then we're going to take a little break for the holidays. So I got one more week. Hope to see some of you maybe next time. Same place, same time, whatever time it is for you, wherever you happen to be. And we'll continue to talk about animation, think about anything that you'd love to chat about. As usual, I love that you guys are chatting and talking amongst yourselves. But beyond that, I will just see you next time if I see it, and have a great rest of the day and a great evening. Cheers, and be safe and well.